Welcome back to the Acorn Land Lab Off-Grid Overview course. We're in a new chapter now. We've moved past transportation. We're going to be talking about zoning and financing. Zoning and financing, and we're going to hit on the issues first. That's been our pattern. Talk about the issues of each of these topics. Zoning is going to be one of your biggest challenges if you want to build off-grid. If you want to build a sustainable, affordable off-grid environment, zoning is going to be the biggest hurdle you've got to cross. It has been the biggest hurdle for myself personally. And it's hard because, we live where we live. We have friends and family that are in our community. And if our community does not allow for off-grid systems, that can be frustrating. If our community does not allow for tiny homes or small house footprints, that can be frustrating because we know, once we see the data, we know this is an affordable way to live. I could be debt-free. Many of us can't afford to buy homes in today's market. And for younger folks, for Generation Z, that'll be the case more and more. We hear stories of our parents or grandparents buying homes in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when interest rates might have been high during periods in the 80s. But back in the 50s and 60s in particular, people had the freedom to build their own home in more areas and often did. Zoning was not nearly as restrictive and stifling as it is today. So zoning really is the dirty secret to off-grid living. And it's not an issue with off-grid living, it's the issue preventing more sustainable off-grid living. So let's talk about personal experience first so I can give you all an idea of what I have to deal with. I'm in Georgia. I'm in the Southeast. You would think the Southeast as a whole would be pretty relaxed on, well, everything. Building codes, zoning, off-grid. In Metro Atlanta, it is not, I can assure you. The minimum size house I could build here is 1,500 square feet. And in certain areas, certain zoned areas, 1,800 square feet. That's the minimum house size. Now, having solar panels, collecting rainwater, those are not issues. Legally, there's probably some diciness around composting toilets or methane digesters. I just don't think methane digesters have been regulated yet, thankfully. The house I'm in currently is on septic, so septic, solar, rainwater catchment, none of those items are issues. The biggest issue here is just minimum square footage. The tiny house in the Acorn Land Lab is 178 square feet. Technically, it would be illegal to live in that full time. We probably will, someone on our team probably will, but it's with the understanding that it doesn't follow the regulations, which is, frustrating. You don't want to live in fear thinking that you're going to be cracked down on by code enforcement. So even when I purchased land, I had no idea about the zoning restrictions. I didn't know it was going to be illegal to live in the tiny house. If I purchased land with a full-size normal home, the tiny house would be fine as an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU. Before I forget, one of the biggest enemies of any type of sustainable living, off-grid living, creative living is an HOA. I can't begin to tell you how restrictive HOAs can be. If you live in one, you already know. I would never live in an HOA. When you purchase a home in an HOA, you are handcuffed into that footprint, into their rules. Some people, especially older folks, like that. And if you like that, that's fine. Know what you're getting into with an HOA. But with young folks I've talked to, if they purchased in an HOA, they quickly find out just how much they do not enjoy that. You have folks breathing down your neck about what you plant, what color your house is. If your grass gets a little too tall, you're in trouble. You need to be out there with your herbicides, your pesticides, your mower. I don't mow my 2 acres anymore. We planted wildflowers. I got tired of spending time mowing. I didn't want to pay for gas. I wasn't about to buy a riding lawnmower. I've got a little electric push mower I charge off solar for right around our house. But I'm anti-mow now. I feel like mowing is one of the biggest scams that was foisted upon the American people. Copying wealthy British aristocrats, it's a sign of wealth to have grass that you just mow without growing any food on. To have a lawn is a sign of wealth from Victorian times, and Americans eat it up. People get out there and buy their riding mower and their pesticides and their chemicals, and there's nothing wrong having a clean and tidy looking yard. The yard here is very small and we keep it mowed. We don't have a garden out front. So I'm not knocking mowing entirely, but the millions and millions of lawnmowers that we burn through, the hundreds of thousands of acres that we keep mowed and poisoned just to have a flat green space is a huge waste of resources and time. So I talk about that just in the context of HOAs. If you want to live off grid, if you want to live sustainably, an HOA is not for you. You want to run from HOAs. An HOA is like zoning within zoning. It's more rules within rules. And zoning is effectively just that. Zoning is just rules. It's rules handed down by your county, rules handed down by your city, rules handed down by the state in some instances. So the main challenges around zoning, before we dive into the financing, zoning restrictions are tailored to conventional housing. It limits the availability for spots to put a tiny home. If you don't want to move to an area without zoning, which is most of us don't want to uproot from our communities, you need to look into building your tiny home or off-grid home as an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. But then you've got to have a good relationship with whoever owns the land for the main house. You could appeal. You can write to your zoning board, but that can take time and money. The bureaucracy is very thick and challenging. Lack of clarity. A lot of zoning laws just are not very clear. Now that sometimes can work to your benefit, but if the county decides they don't like your project, that lack of clarity can be used against you. Local resistance. There's a lot of people that don't like new things. NIMBYs, not in my backyard. If you've got nosy neighbors, if you've got people that are NIMBYs, if they see you doing something different, chances are they'll report you and code enforcement and zoning will be on you lickety-split. Permitting complexities. Permitting can be expensive and time-consuming, especially for non-traditional homes. It can be a lengthy process and it can really add up financially. Areas like Chicago, New York, very densely populated metro areas have a ton of permitting processes and regulations. I would just avoid those areas in general and move to a lower regulation environment. We're seeing people all over the US move to lower regulation environments. People are leaving California for Texas. People are heading to Tennessee. People want areas that have more freedoms, and you want that freedom for off-grid living. Infrastructure limitations. Sometimes zoning prohibits off-grid infrastructure. Sometimes the municipality will require that you connect to their electrical grid, their sewer system, their gas system, and that can really hamper your efforts. All right, that is zoning in a nutshell. A few other comments from personal experience. If you're wanting to run a short-term rental with your off-grid systems, check the zoning. Our county prohibited short-term rentals in campers, Airstreams, tents, a month or two after we purchased our first canvas bell tent and set up our Airbnb. After a few months of rocking and rolling with tons of customers that loved coming and staying in our tent, code enforcement was at our house. And we're going through a very lengthy process trying to get that back up and running. So if I were you, I would avoid a county that's got lots of regulation. All right, so let's leave zoning for a bit. Let's talk about financing options. Off-grid living is something that's very DIY. Traditional lenders, banks, are not inclined to give you a loan to build an off-grid home, mainly because it's hard to appraise. They're unfamiliar with off-grid homes. And up until recently, the demand has just not been there. I believe the demand for off-grid living is just going to boom as the cost of living affordability crisis continues, as people wake up to the issues with our food system, our energy system, our transportation system. Social breakdown continues as we get more polarized through the echo chambers of big tech, social media. Off-grid living is just going to continue to get more popular, so we might see more lending options come online. There are difficulties in appraising unique off-grid dwellings, which affects the property valuation and financing eligibility. There's legal uncertainty just because it's new. There's a lot of new systems and ideas happening. So what I've found to be one of the best options is buying your land through ag credit or some farm agency. Even if you're not a farmer, you can purchase rural land using one of those programs, land that you can use for camping, for recreation, for hunting. So you purchase acreage, and often if you can get more than 10 or 15 acres, there are big tax breaks that you can leverage by keeping your area undeveloped, keeping it as a green space, or growing some type of hay on it or some type of animal feed, growing timber on it. There are massive tax breaks and great programs you can take advantage of. On one of the properties where we build our off-grid systems, I used to pay about $1,000 a year in taxes until I found a timber tax break for growing timber on the property. My taxes fell from about $1,000 a year to $100 a year. So research what tax break programs exist. Often those programs will still allow you to build a residence on the home site. So financing. Your best bet is to finance the land as raw land, which will either be a 10, 15, or 20-year loan. If you can pay for cash, all the better. Then roll in with an RV or a canvas tent, a temporary structure to build out your longer-term off-grid home. If you are able to finance the land and then either pay cash for your tent setup, your RV setup, that is your foot in the door. When you're able to do that, then you could finance a bigger shed or a shell to finish out for the off-grid structure. Often there's financing for the solar panels themselves. It's a little more complicated, but you can piecemeal finance the components you need for the off-grid setup. Getting your rainwater cistern, getting your well dug, if that's the option you're going to pursue, your solar panels and battery banks. You can be up and going with solar power and a water system. Because the composting toilet is simple, you can then eventually add a methane digester. Doing this piece by piece and chunk by chunk is often the best way to go about off-grid living because it's unlikely a lender is going to give you a lump sum loan for the project you want to tackle. Insurance challenges. Once again, because off-grid living is different and new, insurance is going to be a bit of a challenge. Often, if you're building small and affordably, self-insuring is the way to go. Just be working on a rainy day fund and fix things up as they break. Have good safety practices. You can try to find like an RV insurance company for a tiny house, but if you're building a small off-grid cabin, you'll probably have to hunt around to find an insurer that can accommodate the needs you have. So the biggest challenges with both zoning and financing are off-grid living is new. It breaks the mold. It's something that's not as common. And we just have to educate people around us as to why it's beneficial, why it's affordable, why it's sustainable, why it leads to a better quality of life. So I believe over the years to come, things will continue to get better and move more smoothly, but it'll just take more communications and more effort. So your next steps, research your zoning. Are you allowed to build a tiny house or go off-grid at all? Check out Municode to find your zoning documents. I'll list that down below. Are you in an HOA? If you are, how restrictive is it? Can you see why you'd want to avoid an HOA for off-grid living? Do you know a lender who would give you a loan for a tiny home or off-grid land? Do some research. There are some that exist. If I can find any, I'll link down below. Chances are to make off-grid work, you'll need to go rural or go covert in the suburbs. I would not recommend going covert unless you just own the land outright and feel comfortable with that. Your best bet is going rural. Find a small town that needs investment. Find a new place to call home and really start digging in there where there's less regulations. The laws need to change to make off-grid living in urban and suburban environments more friendly. So that's a long game. That's a game that takes effort, time, lobbying, money. In the meantime, find a way you can dig into this lifestyle now, whether it's leveraging land that a friend or family member owns and you building your off-grid setup there as an ADU. Keep it mobile so you can move it once you do find land. Today we're diving into finding the right land and working with a community to do so. Land is the fundamental security in off-grid living. People owning their own small piece of land, in my mind, is one of the most beautiful things. Thomas Jefferson spoke to that value. Abe Lincoln spoke to that value. When people own a small piece of land, they are anchored. They have a corner of the world to call their own, to care for, to invest in. Right now in the US, many people don't own any land, and other people own thousands and thousands of acres. There are more and more mega farms all over the US as consolidation occurs. That's not healthy. That's not healthy at all for society. Land should be distributed among people. Land should be something that everyone's got access to a few acres to call their own. So that's not an easy path. It's not easy to acquire that. It takes a lot of effort. Takes timing. You need to be in a solid position to be able to purchase land. But let's talk about what you're looking for in the land. Then let's talk about how you go about purchasing it and some specific tactics to do so and save a bunch of money compared to going about it solo. So here's what you're looking for in off-grid land. You want rich soil. If you can find land that already has rich soil, that'll save you so much time and effort composting and amending soil. Temperate climate. You can go off-grid up in the icy north, and you can certainly go off-grid in the blazing south. But if you can find a middle ground with 4 seasons, it'll make your world so much easier going off-grid. I'm talking Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, the Midwest, different parts of the western states, Pacific Northwest. And in some of those zones, land can be very expensive. So you have to find your balance. Temperate climates are great for off-grid living. You need reliable, clean water. I would not be going off-grid anywhere near Phoenix, Arizona. A, it's so hot. B, the water issues are going to compound out there. I would make sure that I've researched water thoroughly. Research the water table, research the rainfall. Ideally find land that's got a water feature, a pond, a lake, a creek, a spring. You want natural water features. If you've got access to water, that enhances your self-sufficiency to a high degree. 4 seasons, we spoke to that, having the temperate climate. If you can have a spring, a summer, a winter, a fall, you will be using less energy for heating and cooling, and you'll just have a more pleasant experience unless you just really love a desert environment or a northern environment that's on one end of the extremes. You want low to no zoning. That's a huge one. Regulations are part of what you're looking at too when you go off-grid. Regulations don't trump natural features though. I would rather try to go off-grid illegally in a temperate climate with lots of water, because there could come a day where the regulations just don't matter as much. Counties might not be able to enforce them. Times change. So if I had a no regulation opportunity to buy land in the desert versus a medium regulation environment to buy in the Smoky Mountains that has rich soil, good rainfall, 4 seasons, I'm going to go for the medium regulation in the Smokies in a heartbeat, because chances are I can work around the regulations. I don't want to be stuck with land in the desert no matter what the regulations are if I can't live there sustainably. Not to say you can't live in the desert. Many people go off-grid in New Mexico and Arizona. You can have cisterns, rainwater catchment. It's all about researching how much water is available and can you make it work. It can and will take more work to go off-grid in the desert, but many people do it and love it. Minimal building codes. You want relaxed to know building codes. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use building codes. Many of the building codes are there for our safety. Zoning and building codes are 2 different areas. Building codes come down to how far apart are the studs, what type of conduit are you using, is your plumbing, is your electrical work done properly. Zoning is about what can you build, where can you build it, how big does it need to be. Proximity to like-minded people, that's huge. Going off-grid all by yourself without a community or a network of support, that's going to be an uphill battle. We are built to function in community. We are not built to be individual islands. So if you can find an area where there's already other people going off-grid, people living like you are, people with the same values you have or similar values, that is going to be a superpower that people do not estimate enough. Proximity to like-minded people is huge. Community availability. You want to have the option to buy land in a community, ideally, where there are more people going off-grid. Wide open spaces. I would not want to go off-grid in a densely crowded city that's a concrete jungle. I'm more so interested in off-grid living in the fringe of the suburbs to a more rural zone, and that's where naturally you can do it more easily anyway. Renewable energy potential. How much sun do you get in this area per year? What's the sun exposure? What's the wind potential? What's the hydroelectricity potential? How much biomass do you have? You can leverage all those energy sources in different ways, and we've talked about many of them. Here in Georgia, wind is not an option really for us. It's not consistent enough, but we have family in Amarillo. If you're going off-grid in the Texas Panhandle, wind could be a viable solution for you. There's so many wind farms out there. If you're on the coast, wind could be a solution for you. Here in Georgia, our primary renewable energy sources are biomass because we have so many trees, so much wood, methane digestion because the temperature is conducive for that, and then solar. We get plenty of sunny days. Do the research into how much renewable energy potential exists between wind, solar, hydroelectric, and biomass. Wildlife and biodiversity. I would not want to go off grid in the Midwest between giant cornfields being sprayed with toxic chemicals and pesticides. Research what is around you. Just because you go to a rural zone doesn't mean it's going to be poison and toxin free. You don't want to buy land in the mountains and realize you built right next to an industrial chicken operation or hog farming operation. Try to find land near a state park. Try to find land where there are already land uses that will not change. Just because you buy land in an area where there's lots of open vacant land doesn't mean it'll stay that way forever. So I would recommend finding an area that is unlikely to change a whole lot to build off grid. That way you can ensure that the wildlife and biodiversity should remain fairly stable. If you are in a rural environment with a lot of industrial agriculture, it likely means the wildlife and biodiversity have already been depleted. Natural resources, presence of wood, stone, other materials for natural building, clay, sand, all that aids in self-sufficiency and sustainability. So factor that into your calculus when you're looking for the right piece of land to buy. The point is not to escape society. The point is to build a more slow, gentle, nature-based life. You still want access to basic amenities, especially as you age. You want to be nearby medical facilities. None of us plan to have a medical emergency. They just happen. You'll still want to be near certain grocery locations. You're not going to grow all your food. The best homesteaders don't grow 100% of their food. It's just not realistic. What is realistic is participating in a community where many people grow different items, bartering, trading, swapping, sharing, selling, and having a much higher percentage of your food come from local sources. But you'll want a grocery source for grain, for wheat, for salt, for spices, and essential services. So you do want to be near a small town that is healthy and not dying, ideally. You want to invest in a small area that very likely needs you and people like you. You want to balance the off-grid living with necessary conveniences. I am not some hyper-survivalist type. I was raised in the suburbs. I studied software engineering. I'm teaching myself all these ideas and concepts as we go. That's where most of us fall. Most of us are not coming from some farming background or survivalist background. And I'm not looking to live in a cave. I want to rebuild a dignified life with the basics we need in an affordable, sustainable way. So that's where I really can get behind balance the off-grid living desires with necessary conveniences. Privacy and security. I am all about secluded off-grid locations away from urban areas. We're going through historical cycles. These historical cycles are patterns. Currently, we're in a cycle of decline. There's going to be more strife. There's going to be more conflict. There'll be more issues in urban areas. We saw that kick off during 2020, 2021, during COVID, and that'll continue to grow. There's many cities and towns I like, but I will not be moving closer to a big city with my family. We'll be moving farther and farther out to implement more off-grid systems and more sustainable systems. Elevation and terrain. The elevation and topography are important, mainly because you want to learn how much snow am I going to get and am I in a floodplain. You don't want to buy land in a floodplain. Look at the FEMA maps. I'll link to maps below. Make sure you're not buying land in a floodplain. Make sure that you are equipped to handle snow if you're buying land in a snowy environment. Growing up in Georgia, I don't deal with snow. I don't have the experience, so that's not something I worry about. But if I were to buy land in Maine, I would need to teach myself how to handle snow. All right, let's talk about the biggest hack for buying land that's high quality for an off-grid environment. If you go on LandWatch, Zillow, LandSearch, Land and Farm, and look up 10-acre parcels of land, they're going to be expensive and you're not going to find too many of them. It is hard to find a prime piece of land without a home at an affordable price. You can find scrappy little pieces of 1, 2, 3, 4 acres. You can find giant parcels of land, 1, 2, 300 acres plus. And then you can find a lot of expensive homes that are on acreage. That makes it looks very discouraging when you're trying to find 5 to 10 acres to go off grid on. Here is the method that we will be using moving forward, and the method that I'm seeing being leveraged more and more by friends and other folks in the off-grid community. You need to build a group of 10 to 20 like-minded people or families that are interested in buying land in the same area. You're effectively going to build a village. You're going to build your own subdivision. Now, this is not a commune. Everyone's going to own their own deeded piece of land, but you're effectively just buying wholesale. If you can find a 100-acre piece of land, a 200-acre piece of land The price might still be eye-popping for you. It might be $2, $3, $4, $500,000 or more. But if you get 10 to 20 serious-minded people together or families together that all have the money for a small down payment, you can crowdfund that land. You can create an LLC to purchase the land. The people involved can all become members of that LLC and contribute their funds, their share. You can subdivide the land, have a survey company come in, subdivide it, and then go through the process to legally have deeds made for every new piece of land. Big companies do this all the time. Developers do this all the time. Why not be your own developer? Find your group of people, and the brilliance is you're not trying to do this for profit from your friends and family. You all save the profit margin that the developer would have taken. By saving the profit margin, you are saving yourself a bunch of money as you subdivide this land. So you are likely to be able to pick up 5 to 10 acres as a subdivided piece of a much bigger property that is much higher quality land than if you tried to find 5 to 10 acres solo on your own. Now there's challenges. You've got to work with people. You've got to trust the people you're with. But the benefits are immense. If you find other people that want to build off-grid homes, grow food, collect rainwater, you have pre-built your village. You have pre-built a community of like-minded people that can help each other out. And I'll just restate this. This is not a commune because everyone owns their land individually. I am in no way, shape, or form a fan of any kind of communal living like that. I am in favor of a village that can take care of each other, share their skills, and share their various resources as they're able to barter, sell, and operate in a small town capacity. So if you're able to find that group to buy land and subdivide it, you create deeds for each individual, and all of a sudden you can begin to specialize a bit more. If friend A over here is raising cattle, you're doing pigs and a few chickens, you've got a large garden down the road at one of your friend's spots, that enables you to truly rebuild a sustainable community from the ground up. The Amish really do have a great model where they help each other build out properties. If you've got the right group of people, you can do the same thing, and there will be so much more power in that than if you're operating as a single person or a single family. America is full of a lot of rugged individualists, and there's benefits to that, but we need to realize what power lies in community, especially for leveraging wholesale land costs. So you want to form a land buying co-op. That's what this is, a land buying co-op. Find your 50 acres, your 100 acres, your 300 acres, figure out who wants which piece, subdivide it, buy it wholesale. That is a model that is going to give you the best price for your piece of land and build a community while you're doing it. All right, your next steps. Get on LandWatch, get on Zillow, get on LandSearch, Land and Farm, start researching land. Research how big a small piece of 5 to 10 acres would be, or even 1 to 2 acres if you're buying solo. Then research what a bigger piece of land would cost if you're going in with a group of people. See how much money you'd save. Truly consider finding 10 to 20 others to purchase land with wholesale. Consider creating a buying co-op. Make a Facebook group or a Telegram group to form your future land buying co-op. Research Axe Decentralized Real Estate for inspiration. Axe Decentralized Real Estate is pioneering this model and method. I think it's brilliant, and there's no reason you couldn't do it on your own with friends and family at whatever scale makes sense for you. You'll want a group of people with similar values, people who can afford a modest down payment, and people who you'd want to work with and live near with. You'd form an LLC to purchase the land, then have everyone choose their lot, and then make the down payment, collect funds through escrow, then have a surveyor subdivide the lots. All right, so final note on that. Corporations all too often come in and create developments at massive profit margins. Many of us today simply can't and won't afford that. Rather than relying on a corporation to do the development, create your own co-op, your cooperation with friends and family to make the same thing happen, but on your terms for off-grid living. We're talking a little bit more about zoning for off-grid today. Zoning is going to be the biggest hurdle you have to finding a place to legally build off-grid. The general rule of thumb is that the closer to a big city you are, the harder it is to build an off-grid system zoning-wise. Technically speaking, there's no issue building off-grid in a city. You could have a tiny house, you could build a micro cabin on a vacant lot, you can have rainwater collection, gardens. Our Acorn Land Lab is only on a 1/4 acre. The garden's only 4,000 square feet, and it's produced over 2,500 pounds of produce this year. And then the chickens have laid thousands of eggs. Like, food production in small spaces is not an issue. It's zoning and regulation. Since the 1920s, rule after rule after rule after rule have piled up for county, state, and then city zoning. Zoning was meant to have good intentions. You wouldn't want a massive factory right next to your subdivision. You wouldn't want a stinky giant chicken warehouse, CAFO, next to your subdivision. Well, frankly, we don't want those anywhere. They shouldn't exist. Zoning has become overbearing, restrictive. It's been stifling creativity for decades now. We need massive zoning reform across the US because our zoning is making us unhealthy. Our zoning is binding us to forever owning vehicles and cars to get around. Zoning prohibits us from creating walkable towns. Zoning keeps massive parking lots and roads everywhere when we don't need them. People want livable, walkable environments. We are living in the world they designed on paper in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And I think most of us are tired of that car-centric world. Many of us want more affordable homes. We want more sustainable options. And we're happy to roll up our sleeves and build it ourselves. It just needs to be legal. It needs to be legal to build smaller structures, not connected to utilities, in walkable environments. So, basics of zoning for off-grid. Let's review what you're looking for in zoning. Ideal zoning for building an off-grid home: flexible land use. You want unregulated land, you want unrestricted land. That's hard to find in cities and suburbs, if not impossible. Here in my county, the minimum single-family home I could build square footage-wise would be 1,500 square feet. And in some areas, depending on where in the county, it could be 1,800 square feet. If I go one county south, farther away from Atlanta, the city core, the minimum square footage for a single-family home is 1,400 square feet, so it's dropping. That's the pattern that you're going to see. As you get farther away from a big metro area, there will be less and less regulation and more freedom to build what you want to build. That's just a simple rule. The more people crowded into one area, the more rules there are for everyone to have to abide by. And if you get out to the wide open spaces, you have more freedom to build what you're interested in to support your lifestyle. So you want flexible land use, minimal restrictions, you want minimal to no zoning, and maybe even minimal to no building codes. You do want to use building codes for your own safety. Structural support, electrical, plumbing, water barrier, those are there for your benefit with traditional stick homes in particular. If you're building a more unique home, like a Wafati, an earthship, a cob house, a yurt, you're going to have to research safety more on your own or with experts in those structure designs. But in terms of a 2x4 stick-built structure, the building codes are there for your safety. So while I'm all about bucking zoning, don't buck the building codes. Those are easy to follow and you'll build a safer structure often. Zoning is really where the issues come in for creativity, sustainability, affordability. Our zoning is restricting us from building these affordable, small off-grid homes. You might find more luck if you're in an agricultural rural area. In fact, if you're on acreage, if you're on 10 to 15 acres or more, you can often take advantage of various tax breaks for keeping your land green space, for keeping timber on your land, for raising hay for livestock on your land. You can have massive tax breaks to make it more affordable for your off-grid property. If you are determined on building off-grid in the suburbs or the city, your best bet is building an accessory dwelling unit on a piece of property with a bigger home. If you have a normal home on the property, you can build an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, or sometimes auxiliary dwelling unit. You can live in that ADU, which could be 200-300 square feet, and then rent out the bigger home. And I know that doesn't work for everybody, but many people have done that. I know of a girl up in Atlanta who bought herself a traditional home, built a tiny home in the back, puts her actual home on Airbnb, and then lives in her tiny home because the tiny home is all she needs and she has an income stream from renting the regular home. Other things to look for in zoning: mixed-use zoning is great. We need way more mixed-use zoning. In the suburbs, you can't just have a coffee shop on the corner that you could walk to, as much as you might want one. Often, farming or gardening are prohibited in zones that are not mixed use, especially if there's an HOA. I cannot stress avoiding HOAs enough. HOAs are like volunteering for a whole nother level of government within the existing county and city government. HOAs, I think, are something that more and more young people are going to flee just because they're so restrictive. And you're basically buying a box that costs a fortune to heat, cool, pay for sewer, pay for utilities. It's inefficient, and they're gonna be breathing down your neck about keeping the grass cut. I don't cut my 2-acre grass at all. We plant wildflowers, and I save all that time, and it's better for the pollinators. Okay, other zoning things to look into. Limited utility requirements. You don't want to have to connect to county or municipal sewer, power, gas. You want to set those up on your own. That's the whole point of going off-grid, maintaining those systems. So make sure wherever you're moving or building that you're not legally required to connect to their grid. In many places, that's a requirement. Minimum setbacks are important to look at. The setback is how far away from the edge of the property or the road you can build your structure. Most people wanting to build off-grid are going to do so on a few acres, ideally. So you're going to want privacy and more seclusion anyway. But the tiny home here on the 1/4-acre Acorn Land Lab, that is right off a road on a very small parcel. So I think more people will be building tiny and building off-grid structures that are on small pieces of land, which we should encourage because we can have more infill that way in cities. Permitting flexibility. Some counties are real sticklers about permits. Try to find a county that is not going to require you to pull a permit for every last thing you do. Ideally, you can build what you want to build and pull 0 permits. Permits are expensive and a real pain. Maybe you can even find a spot that encourages solar or rainwater collection. Some cities and municipalities will actually subsidize or give you funds or tanks for rainwater collection, and in some areas you can get tax breaks for solar. Those are some of the more general points on zoning. I wish I had a one-size-fits-all golden rule for everyone about zoning, but zoning is different for every single county across the U.S. Number of counties in USA. I want this to be accurate. In all 50 states, there are 3,142 counties and equivalents. Adding DC is 3,143. Okay, so there's over 3,000 counties in the US. Every county has its own zoning laws. Each county can have 1 or more cities. Different cities have their own zoning laws. You might have state-level restrictions in terms of various land use policy. There are state laws, there are county laws, there are city laws. There are a lot of potential zoning laws to look through and look for. But what's nice is you get a general sense for what areas are more friendly for off-grid zoning. And let me run you through that list really quick before we wrap up. Some of the states that are way more off-grid friendly than most are Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Missouri, and then out west, New Mexico and parts of Arizona. Basically, the more rural you go, the easier it is to go off-grid. And also, the farther south you go, to an extent, or towards the Midwest. So the South, the Midwest, Appalachia, and the desert. There's a lot of great opportunity for going off-grid. But I think it's misguided for anyone wanting to go off-grid thinking we've got to move to those places. I'm in Georgia. I want to change the laws here because I think it's beautiful here in the Piedmont. And my friends and family are here. I want to do more off-grid stuff right here. That's a long battle, but we need more people writing letters to commissioners, writing to city council, telling them these systems are more advanced than legacy infrastructure and housing. These homes are more energy efficient. Micro EVs are going to cost the taxpayers less on pathways than all these giant vehicles running around. Having renewables will lessen the burden on the county with energy production and infrastructure maintenance. There are so many benefits to all this from a municipal perspective if we can change the laws and open people's eyes to seeing these are good things. Off-grid is resilient, it's affordable, it's sustainable. We have thoroughly left the 20th century behind. We're almost a quarter century past the 20th century. We're still here with all those homes from the 20th century, all that aging infrastructure, and all these outdated zoning laws. We need zoning reform, and we need millions of young people and old people alike to write letters and tell their county commissioners and leaders it's high time we roll back these zoning laws and allow young people to build affordable homes that are interesting and unique in walkable communities. All right, your next steps. Check out municode.com. That's where you can see the zoning for your local city or county. Follow building codes for your safety unless you're a pro builder. The building codes are mostly common sense. Do look for a place where you can build without zoning or building codes just to give you flexibility to build the off-grid system you want. and avoid HOAs like the plague. Today we're talking about financing off-grid homes. Right now this is pretty piecemeal. If you build a high-end home that's got rainwater catchment, a well, solar panels, if you build more of a traditional home, you can likely get financing for it. You can likely get a building loan and have renewable companies and other off-grid vendors build high-end systems for what you're dreaming up. However, to build a conventional home that is on property, that is off-grid, is going to cost a mint. You could easily spend $100,000 to $200,000 for the land and another $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for the home. And if you've got the money, if you're established in your career, if you've got the funds and the financing through a build program, that's great if you're wanting a big off-grid home. Everything we're focused on here at Acorn Land Labs is really focused on hyper affordability and accessibility, especially for young people. It's more straightforward to finance a big conventional home that's got off-grid utilities than it is to finance a small home. Financing for creative homes like yurts, cob houses, earthships, wafatis, A-frames, tiny homes on wheels, financing for interesting and novel homes is difficult because the financial industry doesn't have many comparables. There's not a lot to compare those innovative structures to because they're not common. It's not that you couldn't get a loan for those in the future, but the financial industry moves slowly, especially around housing. They're going to be looking at other homes in the area to assess value for a loan, and off-grid just isn't that common. So the most typical path for financing an off-grid home is buy your land first. Find an ag or a rural loan program. Ag credit is one. I'll put a link down below. Find that program where you can put, typically it'll be about 10% down. It's more rare to be able to put 5% down or less on land. You'll be putting 10 to 20% down on a piece of land. And we've talked about building and buying land with a co-op or a group. That takes a lot of work. It's working with people is hard, but you can save a bundle when you buy land wholesale. If you buy 100 acres, 200 acres with 10 other people, and you properly balance out the process to where you've subdivided it, everyone's got their own deed, you can save a lot and get a better piece of land that way. But we understand that doesn't work for everybody. That is a complicated dance to pull off, even though it's super worthwhile. So if you're financing your off-grid piece of land first, you can expect to put 10% down. So if you find a few acres for $50,000, you could be putting $5,000 down and boom, you've got your land. Now that requires you to have researched the zoning and know that you can build what you want to build on that property. So let's say that you've bought 3 acres for $50,000 in Missouri and you put 10% down. So you're $5,000 out for buying that land, and it might cost a little bit more with closing costs. So $5,000 and you got land. My first piece of land that I purchased was 7 acres for $35,000. And I paid that cash actually just because I had saved up. I didn't want to put that money in the market. I thought buying land was going to be a better move. I'm actually quite happy that's what I did. So because the land has appreciated in value far faster than the market. So finding a small piece of land, putting 10% down, and then you got your monthly payment of a few $100 if it's a more affordable piece of land. That is the fastest way to go off-grid under your own steam on your own piece of property. Once you've got the land, you can then finance a shed or some type of shell structure for your tiny home. That could be another 5 to 10 grand for that shell, likely less than 10. And that type of company will often provide financing. So you could have financing for your large shed shell. There are so many shed conversions that people are doing for tiny living where they insulate it, they put solar panels on top that power a small AC unit. You've got rainwater collection and a big cistern. There's a guy in Oklahoma, I'll link to him. His videos make me laugh just because he gets it done. I mean, he's got his shed tiny home, he's got his solar panels, he's got his rainwater cistern, and he's on 30 acres in Oklahoma. He's making it happen out there. If you're able to finance the land, finance the shell, or buy a canvas tent or set up a yurt, you can get going with your off-grid foot in the door faster than you think. With $10,000 put down for land and shell, and then paying for the other systems as you go, you could be off-grid faster than you realize. Now, I'll say this from experience, it would be easier for you to do it when you're already in an established relationship. My wife and I had just got married trying to build off-grid with the tiny house. That was a very tricky proposition because, we had pressure from family and friends, like, why are you doing this? Why are you, living out in the woods in such a tiny little home? And this is before COVID and all that. Now people are waking up as to why people are building tiny and going off grid with the cost of living and home prices. But build your off-grid home with a stable foundation and a stable base. You want a good place to be living while you're working on your tiny home, your off-grid property. And then once it can truly support you, once you've got water, sanitation, some power, then move on to your off-grid site. You don't want to be roughing it out there with kids, not unless they're used to that environment. You don't want to be roughing it out there with a spouse that's not used to the camping life. Think about that before you dive in. All right, financing. The more debt-free you can be, obviously with off-grid living, the better. That's the goal, debt-free living so that you can have freed up time to be able to go do what you want to do. There are lenders that will lend for tiny homes and more interesting projects, but you've got to look hard for them. Starting small is smart. Begin with your basic structure like a tent or a small shed home and build and add on over time. Pay as you go, avoiding immediate large debt. With today's interest rates, someone buying the median priced home in the US at a 30-year mortgage will spend over $1 million in principal and interest. Interest rates were at 3% and even 2% just a few years ago, and now interest rates are at 7%. Interest rates have tripled, and that sends the price of financing a suburban home through the roof. There's so many reasons to pay as you go with a small off-grid property. It's basically a new modern pioneering movement that's happening. You can look into microloans or personal loans. Be very careful with friends and family. You wouldn't want to sour any relationships. My favorite tactic is to just work to save up a nest egg, save up a few $1,000s, get your foot in the door with the property, build your first little structure, and then just add on as you go. If you build a canvas tent to live in while you're building your cabin, once you've finished the cabin and are living in it, you can then put that tent on Airbnb for an income stream to pull in more funding to pay your property taxes. Sweat equity is one of my favorite methods for being able to just build up your systems. But being frugal, having financial discipline, if you spend money on eating out, if you spend money on alcohol or movies or any non-essentials, cut those out so you can start saving up for that piece of land and your little tiny home. Because once you've got that freedom, that's an addicting feeling. That freedom is something that you will never be sad that you worked towards. So your next steps, look into ag credit for purchasing hunting land or recreation land. Look into financing for a tiny home shell, a shed, a yurt, solar panels, rainwater cisterns. Many of these vendors will provide financing for that component individually. It might be easier to go get a big loan for a home, but if you get individual financing for each component you need, you can still accomplish the same goal. The thing to be aware of is the payment term will be much shorter than a 30-year loan, and you'll want to pay it off quickly so that you're not paying a lot in interest rates because there will likely be higher interest rates on these financing options. Financing for land is often done in 10-year or 20-year increments. It can be 15 years as well, but I think that's one of the goals and the dreams of off-grid living. Why spend 30 years paying off a home in the suburbs? Why not try to pay off your home, your tiny off-grid home, in 5 to 10 years? What would you do with all that extra freedom? Would you get a camper van and go travel the US? Would you rent out your tiny home on Airbnb? Would you start a business? Would you grow a garden? That's the whole point, more freedom, more financial freedom. And then next steps, we recommend paying for your systems as you go, cash, one by one. All right, that's it for now. See you in the next video.